Hey everyone, it's me, Alex Lee, GamesBeat's lead news writer, and I'm here for another episode of The Big Show. I'm here at LA for the Hollywood and Game Summit that we're putting on around the Game Awards this week. And I'm joined by Christopher Dring of the game business and Kaare Eriksen, a analyst at Luminate. Thanks so much for taking the time, you guys.
It's lovely to be here.
So we're here to talk about the current state of games journalism, the positives, the negatives, the buzzwords, the trends. I'm pretty much interested in taking this in whatever direction you guys want, but I did come up with a few thought starter questions to just get the conversation going. Let's kick it off. So I think we've all seen that traffic across not just games media, but media in general has really subsided as a result of multiple factors in the last couple of years. So looking into 2026, what business models do you think are actually working for media and games media nowadays?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure any of them are really working. That's the positives. Well, there's sort of everyone's taking the hybrid approach at the moment, which is GamesBeat's doing it, right? Which is the subscription meets the advertising model. Because certainly in the consumer media, you're seeing that AI and various other elements on Google is pulling down that traffic. So you don't want to be too reliant on advertising. So you're starting to see a lot more of that subscription revenue. Getting our readers to pay for their media after nearly 20 years of training them not to pay for the media is a difficult scenario, but it is and let's be clear, I mean, I spoke to a couple of media here around the Game Awards, and it's not anywhere close to the sort of revenue they're getting from their advertising base. But turning your readers into your customers rather than it, because I've always had it where your customer is the one that's paying for your media, right? Customer is the one that pays you. And the people that are paying the media for a long time have been advertising. So therefore, media is instinctively their customers, the advertiser. What do advertisers want is traffic. And that's why you get those, particularly consumer sites, where you've got the people look for a piece of information, you have to go scroll down, sit past 6 ads to get that information. That's all because they're really servicing advertisers, not readers. I mean, getting people to pay for their media is the crucial element, but it's really difficult. And there is a lot of independent sites, startups, one-man bands, those sort of things. They can do it from the perspective of having a fan base and things like that. The more big corporate ones, it's harder to justify. So therefore, it's about what can you put behind that paywall, which is all extra work. I think it looks to me everyone's moving to that hybrid approach, but it's and some places are going full on reader funded. But I'm not sure the reader funded model is going to replace that advertising revenue. And you don't want to be reliant on a Google world, I think, moving forward. But it's tough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen some stats showing that Google's AI overviews are cutting 2 or 3% of traffic just right off the top without even any analysis or nuance. So yeah, I agree.
That's resulting in, therefore there's reduced revenue, reduced traffic on those guides, video game. You can Google how to beat a boss in Elden Ring. You can get it from a Google search now rather than to click through to the site. Therefore, that impacts revenue onto these consumer websites. The consumer websites cut staff or make some changes in order to do it. They put more of their energies around the big games that generate the traffic, which means the smaller games, the breakthrough games aren't happening, and the media ends up chasing the trends rather than leading the trends like it used to. It doesn't play the role in the industry that it used to in terms of discoverability either, because there's too much focus on Grand Theft Auto 6 and those sort of things. So yeah, I think a reliant on Google and advertising is I think heading in if you're doing that, you're heading in a direction that's trouble. But lots of experimentation going around. I don't know how many Substacks people can afford though. That's what.
It's interesting because I think, yeah, I mean, I see gaming as still nascent on Substack compared to other areas like politics or literature. There's very vibrant communities on Substack. We're still starting to see that sort of initial growth on the platform, which is, potentially exciting. Kaare, I'm curious, what do you see working and what do you see not working nowadays?
Well, me personally, I'm in a little bit of a different environment. I work at a company called Luminate that specializes in entertainment-driven data services. So our data powers the Billboard charts, tracks thousands and thousands of film and TV projects, ongoing and coming up within the industry. We also have our SVM streaming product that tracks, the performance of programs on Netflix, Prime, all the various streaming services. So what I do there is a little bit different from sort of the reporting field. I look at what's happening in the news and ongoing trends in the industry and figure out, the right kind of stories to tell with Luminate-based data and some third-party data to, when it makes the most sense. But what I've certainly noticed this year is just ownership shifts in various gaming publications. Obviously, your publication, GamesBeat, became independent from VentureBeat earlier this year, but then you also saw Kotaku change ownership. You also saw Giant Bomb get set up with new ownership, and I believe even Game Informer was able to come back. So I think more than ever, as different gaming publications face all these headwinds, it seems more apparent than ever that, these places need to get it set up at the best homes possible so they can weather, the traffic storm from Google AI summaries and things like that. At my parent company, Penske Media, it's the company that owns, basically all of the entertainment trades at this point, and they've certainly seen an impact from Google AI summaries. And that does seem pretty inescapable. I think, the best path forward for anyone working in this space is to just make sure, the coverage is as good as possible. Make sure, you're not skimping on, some of the harder stories to tell within the industry. So that way, people can see you're looking at things honestly. Like, as much as everyone loves games, people just want to view the industry honestly and all the challenges, both in the industry itself and then all the different outlets that are tasked with covering it.
There is a difference between culture, what we do. We're business journalists, right? Mm-hmm. Or analysts.
Yeah.
And our jobs differ. Our readers are also our advertisers. They're also our subject matter, which it creates. When I joined Games Industry Biz years and years ago, they treated it like another Eurogamer. And I had to sort of explain that doesn't work like that. And I actually did a presentation where I said, look, Eurogame is like a window. IGN's like a window between, on one side, you've got the gamers, the other side, you've got the industry, and they're supposed to be the window between the two. And we're a mirror. We reflect what's going on back to the people that in our own industry. And it's literally in the title of what we do is B2B. It's about connecting people. It's about getting the same audiences talk to each other. So for us, what our business models would be and what our role is quite different to what the consumer media is going through in terms of their challenges around Google. What I will say interesting about the consumer media, what I like about it, is the rise of the niche, which, it's always been niche sites, but that finding your role and being able to target a specific audience that you can then, you can ask them to support you because they become fans of what you do. Whether it's a retro site, an RPG site, a Nintendo fan site, these things are starting to emerge more and more and more. That's what Substack's doing. There's a lot of cool business publications on Substack. I'm not talking about my own, but things like George Osborne in the UK, who does his politics and games one, which is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But it's a very specific subject, and I think we can do that now. And I think that's quite exciting. I think people in those niches are willing to pay for it because they're getting coverage that they perhaps wouldn't have done in a sort of SEO-driven world.
Yeah, I love that example. I recently had the pleasure of meeting the author of the AI in Games newsletter, which I think is another example of one of those really successful niche newsletters. But, he's been doing that newsletter and the YouTube channel for, I think, over a decade now, and it's finally taken off, and there's finally an organic groundswell of interest in this topic. So, I totally agree, but I think it certainly is not just a case of finding a niche and succeeding. It's a bit of a crapshoot, and you need to grind for a while even to make that.
Oh yeah, you're not going to be able to. Yeah. No, there is a journey.
So it's interesting because hearing both of your answers, I could see this going either way. And maybe both will happen to some extent, but do you see the trend moving forward in games journalism as one of consolidation or of fragmentation?
The answer's kind of both, isn't it? Thinking around those big sites, I think you're going to see a lot more consolidation. Some of them are too big to fall, I guess, but I think you're seeing that already. But that's leading to a fragmentation on the lower end of people who are falling out of the game, but want to find their own ways. And because of various different measures, their ways of different platforms. I keep mentioning Substack. There are others. There is ways that you can sort of spin it up. Substack's really fascinating because I've never used it before. So I worked on it this year, and it does so much of the work for you in the sense you can write. I put, for me, mine's a podcast, right? A video podcast. I put it up. It transcribes the podcast. It creates clips you can put up on TikTok for you. There's all of the almost. It's very handy for a one person outfit to be able to do that kind of thing. So it's And so there's tools and stuff that makes it easier for people who are it's just me and a Substack and a newsletter or video podcast or something like that. It's a lot easier to do it. Because of those tools. I can't remember why I started with that, but that's...
No, it's super interesting. And I didn't even know about that clipping function on Substack.
No, I didn't until about 6 months in. But AI does it. So it works. It's sitting there and it thinks this clip's interesting. And then you can go in and go, you cut it off too early, or actually, no, there's another clip I'd rather you did, which is, you can do that on any video software, but
But I mean, clipping is just a tremendously powerful way to drive interest in podcasts nowadays. So that's, cool that they're recognizing that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And speaking to fragmentation too, as good as it is to see various gaming, outlets and multimedia teams get set up with vendor ownership this year, the inverse of that was a site like Polygon, which was at Vox Media, that was unfortunately sold off. And I think a team of around close to 70 people, it might have been that high, was stripped down to basically a skeleton crew. So, there's still that going on, even if there are, more positive stories from 2025. But also in terms of consolidation, there are a lot broader things happening in, the multimedia entertainment space. Of course, we know Warner Brothers, Netflix has entered into a deal to acquire it. Paramount Skydance is reportedly, mounting a hostile takeover to try to get it for themselves. And both of these, potential owners of Warner Brothers and Warner Brothers itself are also in the games industry too, in very different ways among, each of those three companies. But we're seeing that kind of consolidation taking place. Just this morning, we saw Disney strike $1 billion deal with OpenAI as well, allowing, Disney characters to be generated on Sora with users essentially, and then also incorporating like ChatGPT into their own company in various ways. So, I mean, this year is about as consolidation heavy as it's ever felt to me. But, that's the big picture. And obviously at, the coverage level, all the different outlets that are in a position to really tell these stories, it's very topsy-turvy in terms of who has the resources to do it, who operates, more independently on platforms like Substack. It's very, very unpredictable, but lots of things seem to be happening.
And that's the thing, though, with consolidation. You get that stuff happening at the top. That tends to lead to some redundancies or job losses, or people who just don't want to be part of that, or don't like the new culture and they move on and they do their own thing. That causes a rise of new wave. We're seeing that in game development, right? So we've got the big games are coming from new teams. They're not new teams that haven't worked together before. They're new teams. In fact, they left the big company they worked for. They set up a new studio. They made Claire Obscure, right? So that's what you're seeing. And I think you're seeing that in pockets across every other areas of the industry, including the media. But I think the media's still got to prove we've got to have our Claire Obscure, I think, because there's a lot of people having success, but nobody's retiring on their Substack revenue at the moment.
Listen, maybe a bit of a pivot, but Corey, you mentioned OpenAI, and I think we need to talk about AI at some point during this conversation. It's affecting every aspect of gaming. It's affecting every aspect of media. Games media is obviously right there in the mix. So just to turn it around to you guys directly, how are you using AI in your work nowadays? And what do you see as the ideal use of AI in our kind of work?
I think there's no consensus quite yet for the, ideal thing at my company. And again, my company isn't journalism. We're coming at things from the data standpoint. And some of us are figuring out, an editorial approach to all the data we have and how best to present it to the industry. But, AI seems ever present at most companies. It certainly is at ours. We use Gemini, for instance. I think we're still at the experimentation stage. People are, generally encouraged to find ways in which they can incorporate into their own work. I think at the end of the day, everyone's going to have their own opinion as to how efficient that can be, or, what still really needs to be, sussed out on the side of these companies offering these various AI products and services. For me, I just know that, I'm most interested in what's true, what's hard, and what's hard in terms of facts, and making sure that is always, present and acknowledged and work, so no one, gets misled into seeing things in a way that they are not. So how, that aspect is sort of kept intact from like a reporting and journalism angle as AI products become, normalized in workplaces, I think is going to be one of the more interesting ongoing stories in terms of who figures out, the right kind of best practices for it.
Do you use AI at all?
I do. Yeah, I can answer my question first to get you guys comfortable. Yeah, I use AI in my work every day. I'll freely admit that. I don't pay for anything. I've been getting closer and closer to paying for the like $20 a month ChatGPT subscription because numerous people have told me it's good. But I will use ChatGPT essentially as a research assistant. So if I'm looking for sort of service level statistics about something to get a sense of how things are trending, I'll ask ChatGPT for those. And then, of course, I'll click through and I'll verify them by looking at the sources. If I have a long, data-rich transcript of an interview, I'll paste the full transcript into ChatGPT and I'll ask it to isolate numerical data points that were mentioned by the subject of the interview. Once again, going back through the transcript and fact-checking. So I'm never actually, nothing that I create is, nothing that I create with AI is front-facing necessarily, but it's a tremendously useful back-end tool for me in my work.
So you use it so the first part of that, you use it as a search engine effectively to find, because I don't use AI. I mean, I do in the sense that I use AI transcription tools to help me transcribe things faster.
Like Otter?
Yeah, well, yeah, or the Substack has its own.
Otter's great, yeah.
I just mentioned that Substack does its clips. That's AI generated. I didn't know it was doing that, but it was doing that automatically for me. And that's been very handy for TikTok. I've been, I guess, when our audio has problems, let's say mics have failed or something, which has happened to me quite recently, I've used my producer uses AI to help get that, to make it sound, it doesn't sound right, but it sounds better than it did. But I don't use it for any of I don't know why I would use it for like scripting or writing or anything like that, because that's the fun bit. That's the reason why I do it. Yeah, I guess I use those sort of tools. I haven't used ChatGPT for anything.
Really? You've never done anything like what I described, like putting a transcript into ChatGPT? Now I feel like I'm admitting to something shameful.
No, I didn't. That's interesting. You put a transcript, and if you're looking for a certain bit. Huh.
Something I've started to dabble with a couple times that doesn't quite work is I've asked, I'm writing an article about whatever topic, and I know I want to include a quote from this interview about this specific topic. So I'll put the transcript in and then I'll ask ChatGPT, isolate all the quotes that touch on this specific topic. Typically, it will make things up. It will just hallucinate fake quotes that are maybe inspired by things that were actually said in the transcript. So I can't do that.
I use the search function on Word. But I know it's a little bit more advanced than that. I get that.
No, I mean, that's what I end up doing. And I do use Otter transcriptions very frequently. So I'll typically just go to the Otter transcript and just do a, Control F for whatever subjects.
I also think something like the Disney OpenAI deal, that for instance is geared much towards UGC and, and empowering users to experiment with, in this case, existing IP, which, it's definitely kind of left turn for Disney. They've been very critical and, I've had no issues filing cease and desist with companies like Midjourney in the past. So this is, a pretty significant advancement towards a major multimedia, like Hollywood-based company, I guess in this case, accepting that this technology is, not going to go away and finding, their way into it. And in kind of a similar manner to the way they started working with Epic Games last year at the start of 2024. I think that was like a $1.5 billion deal they had to allow, Epic Games to incorporate various Disney IP within, all the different experiences Fortnite offers, for instance. So, and Fortnite obviously has UGC components now too. So I think the way entertainment companies are looking at AI, aside from some of the more, cynical ways they may be looking at it from a cost-cutting perspective, is finding ways to utilize UGC for existing IP libraries. And, you look at a company like Paramount Skydance that obviously wants Warner Brothers. Gaining a company like Warner Brothers is also going to give them an IP advantage for whatever, their own approach to emerging tech is for their company. Because I think, when Skydance acquired Paramount, they made it clear, they wanted to be a very technologically advanced company compared to some of Paramount's other contemporaries in Hollywood. And, the bigger library you have of IP, the more opportunities are that various AI companies are going to open up from a UGC perspective. Obviously, it has to work, which we'll see if that ends up being a significant challenge when these huge companies work more and more with a company like OpenAI. But yeah, it's everything feels like it's advancing rapidly right now.
Still not very good though, is it? I mean, we talk about Auto AI, which is great, but you still have to fix all the transcription afterwards. When are we going to get an AI? I've been using AI transcriptions tools for what? 5 odd years, 6, 7 years, maybe 10 years. I've lost count, but they're still pretty, it's still, I still have to fix everything all the time. Still struggles with accents.
I was going to say,
yeah,
because, I mean, you have an accent. I think I benefit from having like the most neutral sounding mid-Atlantic, like accentless American voice. So for me, Otter actually transcribes my stuff tremendously well.
The bit you don't need to transcribe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it is helpful for the spotlight search because at least I can look at what I'm saying and kind of, I agree. It has its problems. I mean, it's a good cost saving tool. It's never something I'm going to use for front facing content.
Speeds things up, but it's the same with the TikTok clips that Substack does for me. They always end at odd places, and sometimes they've chosen a random. He said something amazing seconds before, which of course, it's a computer machine. It's not going to do that stuff for me. Yeah.
This brings me to another topic that I wanted to touch on that I think is very relevant to this, which is the role of journalists, specifically games journalists, in a community and an industry that's increasingly dominated by creators and influencers, and short form video. So, I mean, you're talking about creating TikToks. To some extent, you are leaning into being a creator to some extent.
Yes,
is that fair to say?
I've been not intentionally, but it has. There's nothing wrong with it.
I hate to say it, but you're a creator.
I have been described this week by 2 people as a business influencer, which I was like, which I guess my face is on things now, which wasn't the case before. And oddly, some very, very, very senior person at Nintendo just says they watch my TikToks, which I can't. But you watch TikTok anyway. But yeah, I think the role of journalists, really, a lot of these influencers are leaning on the journalism and leaning on what they're reading in the media for their influencers. A lot of the time, the journalists are the influencers of the influencers. And I think sometimes in an industry, we can forget that in an ecosystem play. The media may have lost a lot of its direct influence. People get their review scores from Steam user reviews these days, and a lot of the news, a lot of the discoverability is happening through influencers and content creators. But where are the content creators finding these games? There's a great example. I've got the name of the game, but Secret Mode published it over a year ago. It's an indie game, and that game was discovered by Rock Paper Shotgun. Well, I say discovered, but they wrote about it. Got picked up by one of those Wholesome Direct type videos. I'm not sure which one. It may have been Wholesome Direct. And then the publisher discovered it through the Wholesome Direct. An influencer discovered it from that. The publisher discovered it from the influencer. And it created this here, but it started with Rock, Paper, Shotgun. I think people need to be aware that, yes, the media's smaller, doesn't have as influence about that kind of thing, but it plays a real vital role sort of at the beginning.
Wow, shout out to Rock, Paper, Shotgun. I love that example. Corey, I'm curious, from someone who's more on the data side, do you think it's necessary for journalists to start posting short form video and participating more in the algorithm game to stay relevant?
I think whatever gaming journalists can do to keep their field fresh and relevant is obviously worth exploring. I think the biggest priority is just authenticity. There are certain types of people who really know how to leverage video platforms the best. Then there are other people where, the written word is much stronger and reliable for what they're doing. And, as good as it is to explore with different formats, ultimately, whoever oversees publications, even if, they're more bare bones and independent, you have to be willing to make decisions as to who is best for video and then who is best for, more traditional forms of expression.
Not everybody's as good looking and charming as the 3 of us on this podcast, but
yours is also very conversational when you use video.
But it is also frustrating. I speak to other journalists that write something and then an influencer will read out almost that article on a video and get significantly more views and make more money out of it than they can. So I do think it is important to try and distribute your content. I put that in air quotes, in as many ways as you possibly can, because otherwise someone else will do it.
I want to ask one more question just to tie this all together, with AI and with the rise of journalists as creators, where is the next generation of games journalists coming from? Is that a problem?
Yeah. Yes. I don't know where you're training those up. I don't know where the journeys are for these people. There's no entry level roles. And then the more senior people are sort of falling out and getting out of the industry to bring those people through and train those people up. I always found it quite difficult in the games industry where young people, it used to be always young people and the senior people was going to PR. But it used to mean the young people in the industry would be writing that you won't believe this. And everyone's like, yes, we've had this controversy 5 years ago, but you missed it because you're new and young. Now the situation's reversed. There's a lot of older people and there's not a lot of new blood coming through, and they're having to do it themselves in the same way that, in a way, I guess, new game developers are having to do it themselves. And I think that's really, I don't know, I couldn't have done that when I was young. I know I had like fan sites I did when I was a kid, but starting off without somebody helping me and nurturing me and directing me and telling me what's right and what's wrong, I don't know. I think that's difficult. And I think that's one of the big challenges of AI, is it gets rid of those entry-level roles.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, without substantial entry-level jobs, you're building a gap of knowledge and experience. I mean, you see this on the Hollywood side, especially after the WGA strike in 2023. One point people were stressing back then was, the whole point of a robust writer's room is to bring up the next generation of talent. And if these rooms get smaller and smaller and smaller, and people, aren't able to get started in the industry, it's not just a problem in terms of employment. The people you want to be experienced to write the best shows, give appreciators of art really interesting and creative and dynamic experiences, you need experienced people to do it. So, there's still a lot of, veterans of the space, but if it gets harder and harder for people, like in any industry, who are going to be the next generation of talent to get started and start building that experience, a lot of these companies can face serious issues down the line with just not having the experienced people they need. So
that's where education comes in. Ultimately, puts pressure on the universities and the colleges and the schools.
Save us, universities. All right. I think we're over time now, so I'll cut us off there. But Chris, Corey, thank you for a seriously interesting and wide-ranging discussion. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.